Welcome back to the weekend with me, Alex Armstrong. Well, the Prime Minister is facing fresh accusations of betrayal from farmers following Labour's failure to deliver a key manifesto pledge to support British-grown food. Before the election, Labour promised that half of all food bought by the public sector would be locally produced. But a new report from the Countryside Alliance has revealed it's not being met, with just 2 government departments currently sourcing the majority of their food from British producers. So, is the Prime Minister failing British farmers once again? Well, joining me now is Parliament and Government Relations Manager at the Countryside Alliance, David Bean. David, thank you so much for joining me. More bad news for farmers, isn't it? Is this a failure of their manifesto pledge?
Good afternoon, Alex. Thank you. Yes, I would say that it does tend to suggest that, yes. The public sector has an immense potential to support Britain's struggling food and farming sector through the money that it spends on food that it needs to procure for all manner of different reasons. It could be buying food from British producers and suppliers that was ultimately sourced from British farms. But sadly, our report has revealed that it isn't doing that currently. In fact, what we're seeing is that relatively few bodies within the public sector, and this is central government departments as well as local councils, even know where the food that they've been sourcing originates from. And of course, if you aren't tracking the origins of the food you're procuring, then it will be impossible to demonstrate progress against any kind of target to improve the proportions that are coming from the UK.
Yes, and it's certainly not been a good year for farmers so far, has it? Of course, we had the inheritance tax. Government was slammed for that, I believe, by most farmers. But also, the weather has also made crop yields substantially down. How damaging is this going to be for farmers over the course of the next year, at least?
Absolutely. Farmers are facing a combination of different problems at the moment. You mentioned the weather. Also, farm gate prices for a great many products are not looking especially strong, even so. So the amount of money that they're able to make from what products they can produce is under considerable pressure. That's why we're so keen to see the public sector being used in its purchasing power to support them, to improve the amount of the size of the market, effectively, that is open to British food producers. But yes, you're quite right, the policy decisions haven't helped either. And certainly the long-term impact of the family farm tax, the changes that the government has made to inheritance tax, could potentially be devastating for many family farms across the country.
David, what is it the government need to do to get farming back to being great in Britain? Because it seems to me that farmers are being attacked on every single angle, and we still import, is it 30% of our food from abroad? That seems likely to go up at this rate. What is it the government need to do?
It does appear that we may be facing additional reliance on imports in the future, and that's not a good place to be as a country. We do need to have a policy that recognises the value of food as effectively a matter of the security of our country. And in fact, I think it's slightly ironic that the government has a standard line that it's been using for some time now, where they declare that food security is national security. They say that they recognise that. But unfortunately, many of the decisions that they're making, particularly, as I said, around inheritance tax, around the lack of progress that we've seen on public sector food procurement, they don't really seem to be bearing out those words in terms of the policies that are coming through. Now, I mean, clearly the other issue that farmers are facing is that we are at the tail end now of the transition away from the Common Agricultural Policy to domestic sources of subsidy for food and farming. Now, the objective was always to pay farmers public money for public goods, looking particularly about environmental improvements, welfare improvements, that sort of thing. But many farmers have been calling for a long time for the government to recognise the importance of food production as a good in itself, and to make sure that there is still some funding available on top of what is paid for in participation in environmental schemes, simply for increasing food production. And that, I think, is something that there will be growing pressure over the coming years to see the government take some action on.
Well, David Bean, thank you so much for joining me. Parliament and Government Relations Manager at Countryside Alliance there, David Bean. Thank you very much for joining me. Really shaming. It's really shaming, isn't it, that our country can't prioritise our national security, in my opinion, our food. Anyway, in a response, a government spokesperson said this: our commitment to farmers and food producers remains steadfast, which is why we want our farmers to be well placed to bid for a fair share of the £5 billion a year spent on public sector catering contracts. Our new national procurement policy statement and the Procurement Act simplifies the procurement process, removing bureaucratic rules and regulations, opening up new opportunities to small businesses and creating good local jobs. The government is consulting on reforms to go further to strengthen the UK's economic resilience and support British businesses. Well, there you heard it from the government.